Exercise A. Meaning from context. Page 184.
Margaret Mead and Coming of Age in Samoa. Margaret Mead was an American cultural anthropologist. She was interested in the emotions experienced by young people as they grew to be teenagers and young adults. She wanted to know whether these emotions were universal or whether they varied in different cultures. In the background at this time was an ongoing nature or nurture debate, which addressed the question of whether behavior was a result of biology or of culture. Mead knew that young people in the USA in the 1920s often experienced stress, and she wondered whether this was the case in other parts of the world. To carry out her research into this question, Mead traveled to the island of Samoa in the Pacific Ocean to research the psychological development of Samoan girls. Mead spent 9 months in Samoa talking to girls aged 9 to 20 and giving them psychological tests. She watched their behavior, their relationships with others, and how they expressed themselves. Mead was an early student of body language, so she must have noticed the girls' facial expressions in specific situations. It was evident to Mead that stress did not occur in young Samoans in the same way that it did in young Americans. Samoan girls had more freedom and did not experience the same pressure as American girls. Mead published her research findings in her book, Coming of Age in Samoa. The reaction to the book was not entirely positive. Some anthropologists thought her writing did not reflect the complex reality of life in Samoa. Some Samoans found Mead's description of their culture offensive. Although it is controversial, Mead's book became a well-known anthropology text and is still used in many college courses.
Listening. Are emotions universal? Exercise B. Main ideas. And Exercise C. Details. Page 186.
Okay, did everyone have a good coffee break? How are you all feeling right now? Happy? Excited? Not bored, I hope. The reason I ask that question is that we're now going to talk about emotions. We're going to address 2 questions. Are emotions universal? In other words, do people around the world experience the same emotions, and if so, are they expressed in the same way in different cultures? So let's start with a definition. An emotion is a reaction to something we experience. We might react emotionally to an event, to a conversation, or to a memory, or a beautiful sunrise. These things all cause emotions. Emotions are very much part of the human experience. Now let's move on to the controversial question of whether emotions are universal. Whether people from different cultures experience the same emotions. Let me give you some background. Do you all remember the biologist Charles Darwin? Well, in 1872, Darwin argued that emotions are universal. Even if we don't understand the language a person is speaking, we can understand their feelings by looking at their face. But then in the 1950s, Margaret Mead, a well-known cultural anthropologist, argued the opposite. According to Mead, people from different cultures experience different emotions and they express them differently. Now I'm going to introduce you to the work of a psychologist by the name of Dr. Paul Ekman. Ekman is famous for his work on emotions and is recognized as one of the most important psychologists of the 20th century. Darwin and Mead had conflicting theories, and Ekman wanted to see whose theory was right. In 1968, he visited the Fore people in Papua New Guinea in the South Pacific Ocean. These were people who had no connection with the rest of the world. They had never seen photographs or films. They hadn't even seen themselves because they didn't have mirrors. With the help of a translator, Ekman told the four people stories related to specific emotions. For each story, he showed them photographs of Western people showing emotions through facial expressions. He asked them to choose the photograph with the facial expression that reflected the emotions in the story. Ekman found that if he told a happy story, the four people chose a face with a typically happy expression. If he told a sad story, they chose a sad face. Remember that these were people who had never seen movies or television. Through this research and other studies in later years, Ekman came to the conclusion that certain emotions are universal and that they are expressed through similar facial expressions. Ekman identified 7 universal emotions. These are anger, contempt, disgust, enjoyment, fear, sadness, and surprise. These 7 emotions can cover a wide range. Enjoyment, for example, covers emotions ranging from finding something funny to being excited to feeling a sense of peace. Sadness ranges from disappointment to grief when someone dies. Fear is another broad category, ranging from feeling nervous about flying to feeling terrified when you're in physical danger. Contempt is the feeling that you are better than someone else. You don't respect another person. It's often related to power or position in society. Disgust is the emotion you experience when you see something unpleasant or offensive, like watching someone eating a big juicy steak if you're a vegetarian. Ekman also concluded that certain facial expressions are universal. For example, it's easy to recognize happiness because a happy person is usually smiling. A smile of real happiness involves not just the mouth, but also the muscles around the eyes. If a person is angry, their eyes may be opened wide, and if someone is surprised, their mouth is likely to be open. Ekman's work is supported by a number of studies. A recent study conducted by Dr. Sophie Scott compared facial expressions for certain emotions in the United Kingdom and Namibia, a country in sub-Saharan Africa. It was evident from Scott's research that universal facial expressions for certain emotions, such as anger, fear, and sadness, occur in 2 very different cultures. However, it is also clear that, to a certain extent, culture influences the expression of these basic emotions. Ekman has compared the expression of emotions among American and Japanese individuals. In one study, these 2 groups were shown videos of unpleasant scenes. When no researcher was present, both groups displayed the same expressions of disgust. However, when a researcher was in the room, the Japanese viewers hid their feelings with smiles. Ekman suggested that in Japanese culture, it is perhaps less acceptable to show strong emotions in front of others. I think it's safe to say that there are certain universal emotions, but the precise ways in which these are expressed vary among cultures.
Exercise E. Focused listening. Page 187. 1.
Do you all remember the biologist Charles Darwin? Well, in 1872, Darwin argued that emotions are universal.
2.
Through this research and other studies in later years, Ekman came to the conclusion that certain emotions are universal.
3.
Ekman also concluded that certain facial expressions are universal.
4.
Ekman suggested that in Japanese culture, it is perhaps less acceptable to show strong emotions in front of others.